Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about modern day slavery. Now, it doesn't have exactly the same or precisely the same definition of slavery, in historical sense has, but it amounts to more or less the same thing. So let's have a little look at that and contrast that with and give an explanation to what slavery was and the history of slavery. Slavery's been going on as long as there've been human settlements. Typically, labour shortages have been amongst the motivations for it, or if a society gets a little bit more affluent, maybe they want house servants, things like that. Sometimes slaves are brought in because they have particular skills. In the case of the Roman Empire, slaves were captured and used for a limited or specific period, and then went on to become Roman citizens and achieve high office. Some of the most senior public servants and officials in the Roman Empire were former slaves, to give you an example of that. And if you want to look that up, you can look up names, say, for example, the advisors to the Emperor Claudius, Pallas and Callistus. You can have a little look there and see how influential and important they were in the management of the mighty Roman Empire, and they were former Greek slaves, and I think they originally enslaved to be tutors to the wealthy, the children of the wealthy. So. But looking at slavery, so slavery's been around forever. What white people came very late to the game of slavery. The Arabs have been practicing it for a good 800-900 plus years, enslaving black Africans long before the whites turned up. And and Spain and Portugal had quite small populations relative to the size of South America and the large plantations and things like that. They were so slavery became again the go-to for labour, to get labour there. The other thing was too, white people didn't cope so well with the climate and the conditions and the diseases of the Americas, whereas blacks were surprisingly hardy to those diseases. So they were a sort of go-to choice of workers for that environment. And of course the slavery we know. I mean, the slavery discussion today, you'd think it was only ever white people running around Africa randomly grabbing black folks to become slaves. That's absolute and utter bullshit. The slaves that were brought from Africa to the Americas and to the Caribbean as well, they were captured by other black slavers. So the blacks would enslave each other and then bring them to the Arab slavers, and then bring them to the ports where the white ship owners would then transport those slaves to the Americas. So the idea that it was white people running around enslaving the blacks is utter nonsense. So slavery's been around for, again, as long as there have been human settlements. Even slavery within areas. The Scottish lowlanders would raid what today's northern England to grab slaves and workers. Sometimes if a village was getting a bit small in the gene pool was getting a bit tight there, they'd go and enslave some man or woman to freshen up the gene pool. All sorts of things like that. So slavery is a real go-to for a whole range of things. Work was one, and again, servants in the house, tutors, or as I mentioned a moment ago, freshening up the gene pool. So slavery, though, there wasn't much difference between slavery and long-term indenturement of, say, what would have been equivalent of an apprentice or something like that centuries ago. So particularly if you were travelling to another country. So someone in America may offer a job to someone coming from, I don't know, England or Ireland or somewhere in the British Isles, and they would pay their passage to come out, would also guarantee to give them training, accommodation and food. and the person had to work, of course, or learn their trade. But they would then be required to, say, spend 15 years, for example, 15 years of their life working for these people in order to pay back the training and the passage on the ship and all that sort of stuff. So now the rights of someone who was in such a position there wasn't much better, if better at all, than a slave. So so whether you were legally owned, as was one case, which is really the rub, one person legally owning another, or you legally owned that person for the period of their indenturement, the difference between the two was almost minimal. So you could say that many thousands, indeed tens, if not hundreds of thousands of white people were so enslaved through that indenturement thing. Today we've got a little bit different. The freedom of association that white Western nations have, we need to understand, and I've travelled the world doing business, so I can give you absolute first-hand commentary on this. That freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom to sell your skills or sell your labour or those sorts of things, free to vote and all that stuff, those are very, very rare across the world, and even rarer still if you want free and fair elections and things like that. The standard across the world is rotten to the core governments and rampant runaway corruption. And crime and so on. That's the standard around the world. Now, there are a few countries, Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand, that sort of thing, where that is not the norm, although you wonder if it's becoming so. That is not the norm. But that freedom of association, to sell your labour, all these sorts of things, that is very rare across the world. Out of the 190 countries in the world, there'd maybe be 35, 40 tops that would have that sort of thing, and also to varying degrees. With many countries, you have to have special papers if you even want to go to the next town or village. Such are the controls. And I've been to these countries where you effectively have to have a political escort around these places if you want to go from like one city to another. Whereas, if I go to for example, I go to the United States, I can travel. I used to go many, many times. I could travel anywhere I wanted, any plane. I could hire a car anywhere and drive to wherever I wanted to go, meet whoever I wanted to meet. Had complete freedom of association, as indeed I did in other countries, in for example, Western Europe and Britain and so on. Very different once you get outside that sphere. So the people, the mass migration of third world illiterate, and illiterate in their own language, let alone English or Western European language, the mass migration of all these peasants, which the globalists are actively and feverishly orchestrating. Look at the southern US border, for God's sake. So these peasants coming in, something either slavery or something closely approximating slavery is kind of how things are done over there. So it's for them and the people that come. It's kind of an extension to really it's a continuation of the life that they've led in those third world shitholes. So they come to the West, and maybe a guy who's got a bit more money than the others, or maybe he's part of the corrupt mafia type elite from those third world countries. He realizes that he can win, say, cleaning contracts, as an example. He can win cleaning contracts, or contracts to cut sandwiches, or contracts to pack lettuce leaves into some packaging factory or something. He can win these contracts, labour hire contracts, whatever. He can win them by using illiterate peasants from his country, and he's got them by language. He knows they're illiterate and prefers the mentally retarded, simple hick peasants from out in the sticks, and makes all sorts of scams and shams up to bring these people in as skilled labour. And we've got this in Australia now, this this asinine thing of we need skills, and this means illiterate fucking dishwashers and broom pushers and so on. What, that's the needed skills? I mean, give me a break. So the globalists are actively facilitating the movement of just these sort of people to go into just the sort of slavery that is the modern day slavery. And the globalists might as well have written the script, for fuck's sake. So these people arrive, and now what they do is and this is where the kind of the approximation of the ancient slavery things come in. When these people arrive, there are goons back in their own country that can threaten and intimidate their family or their relatives or their sick grandma and all that sort of thing. So they're here. They're a bit exposed. If they kick up a fuss, if they leave or go away, maybe grandma's going to have her health benefits removed or those sorts of things. So they've got to tread pretty carefully, and they come from a British existence where threats and cruelty and these sort of things are a natural way of life. They don't have any concept of, maybe there are some bad people in the West as well, but they don't have the same concept of I don't know, caring about the things around them that most Westerners do. For example, there's a guy, a part of I can't remember what he's one of the Asian third world countries. He's come to Australia, and one of the first things he does is buys a fucking python or a constrictor snake, and then he goes to the pet shop and buys guinea pigs, and then puts them in with the snake. Then invites his peasant fucking buddies over to watch as the terrified guinea pig runs around and then when the snake gets it, they all cheer and these sorts of things. They even do that to local marsupial animals here in Australia. They do those same sorts of things. People are invited over and take bets. It's unbelievable. They're not the same as us, and they have very strange views and attitudes. Not all, but the peasants in particular lived a brutish life. Other things they do, like in their own country, they'll get dogs to swim across a river that's infested with crocodiles, and to see if any dogs make it to the other side, and the screaming, howling in pain dogs in there laughing and cheering and wah, hey, got no concept on how anyone can stand by and watch another animal in pain and absolute fear, and that is beyond me. But maybe I'm too soft or something. Maybe I'm just some silly, soft, stupid, straight white guy. But those sorts of things. Now, so they come from that sort of environment. So slavery is not much of an extension or a stretch really from that for them. Not for us, but for them. So they're brought to Australia as skilled, or the West. Could be anywhere in the West. The so-called skilled labour, which is in itself a scam, that the authorities just look the other way and let it happen. As long as the person's brown or black, hey, in they come. And then they're put up in accommodations owned by the mafia guys from the third world country anyway. So they're getting all the tax breaks and all and scamming the system here for that. Then they can put them up at 15, 16, 17 of them to a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. They're rows of mattresses. They're lying on those, and that's where then they have to pull 12-hour shifts. They're fed, and so the accommodation and the food, even transporting them somewhere, this is all billed against them. They're like invoice charge money for these services that they're compelled to take, by the way, and then that comes out of their pay. So theoretically, they're being paid the award wage so that they could pass muster on that. But when they deduct the accommodation and the food and the transport, they're left with fuck all in terms of money in their pockets. So nor do these people, the mafia goons, want these guys to have money, because then they might have discretion. Then they may go places and do things and find out about things. And so they keep them pretty much under control there with the money. Now you can have an army of NGO activists who are going to run around and say how women are oppressed by evil straight white male Hitlers, because they're don't have enough money or something like that. But when it comes to this sort of thing, strangely, those same people, armies of lawyers that can appear out of nowhere to stop some black or brown murderer getting deported back to wherever they came from, there's no lawyers covering this. This seems to just be very quietly slipping under the radar. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it is, in my view at least, modern day slavery. And you look at any industry, cleaning industry, packaging, sandwich cutting, people doing manicuring, pedicuring, that sort of stuff. There's a whole range of these industries. And some of these people are promised falsely, and most of the time, that you can get to stay in a first world country, then you can bring out all your relatives, the entire village, thousands of people can come out. And so think about that. So your suffering today is for the benefit of them tomorrow. And of course, a lot of people believe that shit. Some cases, actually, it does seem to be true. But this is how, so really the definition of slavery has changed slightly. Not much, but it's changed slightly. But because it's all mixed up in this multiculturalism and all this sort of stuff, then it's seen as something, well, gee, that's okay. Well, hey, that's all right. And you got a problem with that, you damn fascist white Nazi Hitler? And that's really how the conversation goes. So that's my take on modern day slavery and where and how it's happening. You've been with Tassifs today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.